introduced me. And I'm grateful that all of you made time to be here. I know there are a million places everyone could be. You could be sitting home watching CNN and the countdown clock to when the Republicans shut down government. But you came out here tonight to talk about the election for governor this year. And you know what? As I get across the state, there is an enthusiasm and engagement and energy across the state like nothing I've ever seen before. I started this campaign January 3rd of 2017. And when I jumped in over a year ago, a lot of people thought maybe it wasn't a smart move. Maybe I'd lost my mind. Maybe it was too close to the last election. But what I knew after waking up after that presidential election the next morning was that I had to throw my energy into something constructive. Because if I didn't, this situation in Washington, D.C., in the state of Michigan would eat me alive. And I have traveled the state, and I can tell you, from Gogivet County on the western end of the UP to Grand Rapids to Livonia to downtown Detroit, people are turning out. They're ready to fight for the things that we believe in. Schools for our kids, roads that keep us safe, jobs that support our families, and government that never forgets it works for the people of Michigan. Now, I love the state of Michigan. I am a proud Michigander, and I recently found out on my mom's side we're fifth-generation Michiganders. I didn't even know that until relatively recently. But whether you are a fifth-generation Michigander or you've just chosen to make Michigan your home, we all deserve a state that keeps our individual interests at the heart of the work that is done at the state capitol. We deserve leaders who are honest with us, don't give us false expectations or managed expectations or false choices. They tell us the truth and they fight for the aspirations for our state, for the people who live here, and for the people we want to move to this state and make home. And I tell you, as much as I love this state, I look around at the Michigan that my kids are growing up in, and it doesn't resemble the one that I think of when I talk about my Michigan pride. You know, there was a point in time where people packed up their families, and they got in the car, they put all their belongings, packed up, and came to Michigan, because this was the state that invented the middle class. You could get a great job that paid you well enough. You could actually buy the car you were making and raise your family up and retire with dignity in this state. And no matter what part of the state you lived in, you knew your child was going to get a phenomenal public education. You also knew that maybe they'd be able to go into one of our universities because we, the taxpayers, made sure that it was affordable for families. And when you turn on your tap, the water was going to be good enough to bathe your child and give them a glass of water at the dinner table. That's the kind of Michigan we deserve. That's the kind of Michigan we've got to demand in this election. Now, I have to tell you, I am no stranger to tough fights. I never, my mom raised me well enough. I never go out of my way looking for a fight. But you don't back down from a tough fight either. We've got some tough fights ahead of us. When I was the prosecutor in Ingham County, the judges asked me to come in and clean up a prosecutor's office that had been ravaged from a scandal. The workforce demoralized. Public lost all faith in the confidence in the office. And the judges asked me to come and clean it up, and I took it on. When my colleagues in the Democratic caucus in the Senate asked me to be their leader in a sea of Republicans, from Rick Snyder with a supermajority in the Senate to controlling the House too, I took it on. When governors of both parties took money out of the school aid fund to shore up holes in the general fund, I took them on. And when, thank you. And when the whole Republican establishment locked the public out of the Capitol, put mounted police to intimidate Michiganders who showed up, who just wanted to have their voices heard, when they decided to attack our rights to collective bargaining, I didn't just stand outside, although I did for a long time in the cold with the nurses and the firefighters and the auto workers who came to be heard. But I threw open the doors of the Capitol and we led the resistance from my office. Because when government shuts you out, it's not looking out for you, and we deserve better. Are you with me? Now, I started by telling you how much I love this state, and I do. I am proud to have spent my whole life here. I'm proud to be a product of the public schools. I am a proud mother of 2 daughters who are in the public schools. And I am proud to also live in the city of East Lansing with my husband, Mark. We are kind of a new age Brady bunch. Mark brought 3 boys into the family, and I brought 2 daughters. We're missing one, and we're going to keep it that way. But you know, we make our home in East Lansing, and I'm so grateful that I stayed in Michigan. And I want my kids to feel that way. I want your kids and grandkids to feel that way. It's because I was here in Michigan that when my mom got sick with brain cancer, I was able to take care of her at the end of her life. And I found myself at the age of 29 a member of the sandwich generation. I see a few heads nodding, but for those of you who don't know what I mean when I use that phrase, I was sandwiched in between 2 generations of my family that I personally took care of all their health care needs. I had a mother who was 59 and dying of brain cancer, and a daughter who had given birth to 3 months before my mom died. I confronted a lot of things that a lot of people in our state confront every single day. Writing my mom's end-of-life plan, taking on an insurance company that wrongfully denied her chemotherapy drugs, worrying about daycare for my newborn or how I was going to continue to breastfeed when I went back to work. These are concerns that women and men across our state, not the breastfeeding for the men, but these are concerns that Michigan families are confronting every single day. I was able to have that 2 years, which were the toughest 2 years of my life, but I'm grateful that I was able to do it and take care of my mom, and it was because I was here in Michigan. I hope my kids make that same choice. I want all kids to be able to make that choice and write their stories right here. But in order to ensure that this is the state where they stay and others move to again, we got a lot of things we've got to fix in Michigan. We've had a succession of leaders who didn't want to dig in and make the tough arguments and set the agenda that fixes the problems that we are facing right now. We've got an education system that the DeVos family has ravaged after 25 years of tax. We didn't go from leading the world in education to bottom 10 because of anything other than a lack of leadership and a lack of support coming out of Lansing. We've also got some of the worst failures in government that we've seen in decades, that we've seen in my lifetime, and perhaps in any of ours. The Flint water crisis is a prime example of government failure at every level, where people were ignored, and some paid the ultimate price of losing their lives because their government didn't care enough to treat the water. To save a few $100s a day, it's cost people's lives, and 8,000 children brush their teeth with poison every day for over 2 years while their government said relax. It's fine. They're gonna have lifetime issues that they're gonna have to deal with from that. And we have an attorney general who should have been looking out for the people of Flint, who continues to pursue his political agenda as opposed to really get justice for the people of Flint. The unemployment insurance agency scandal that you're probably aware of. The system that was created to root out fraud screwed up and wrongfully accused 20,000 Michiganders of trying to defraud the state. And the same attorney general who ignored the people of Flint for 2 years when they were showing up with bottles of water you couldn't even see through, he is pursuing criminal charges against people who didn't do anything wrong. They're filing bankruptcy. Marriages are ending because of the stress. People are losing their homes. That's how stark this choice is going to be in 2018. Now I tell you, I've traveled the state, been to 50 out of the 83 counties, and I'm getting into every one of them before this is through. Because I was brought up in a family with a father who was a moderate Republican, which means he's a Democrat now, and a mom who actually worked for Frank Kelly, our great eternal general. But the lesson in our household was this: everyone is important. You show up even into a red county, because you know what? Everyone in this state is important, and we only learn how to address the problems that people are confronting if we talk to them, if we learn, if we seek to understand. Another lesson in our household was that our allegiance to our state comes first. It comes before party, and it comes before political donors. We need more politicians who are trying to do the right thing. If we had that in Washington, D.C. right now, we wouldn't be on the verge of a shutdown.
Absolutely.
And I'm not talking about the Democrats. But the other lesson was that the best public servants are the ones that stay true to their values, but fight when their values are on the line, but seek to collaborate and solve problems where they can. And that's what I always tried to live up to when I was in the legislature. And when I was in the legislature, I was the first one to open up the doors when collective bargaining rights were attacked. I was the first one to the microphone and shared my story of being a survivor of assault when women's health was on the line. I fought education cuts, and I made tough votes to fund the roads. But I also rolled up my sleeves when I had the opportunity to work on extending Medicaid in Michigan. We had a governor who I think is about 99% wrong, but he embraced the Affordable Care Act. And when he did, I knew he was never going to get it done without my help. And we negotiated the terms and put the votes together, and now 670,000 people have health care in Michigan who didn't before. So the issues facing our state are urgent and they are serious, and the stakes couldn't be higher in this election. As I talk to people across our state, as I listen to what's standing in the way of people from achieving their goals and finding, a life that they can be proud of and secure in and happy with, they're the dinner table issues. We've got to make education work in Michigan again. We've got to support the heroes on the front line, the teachers and the parapros and the bus drivers and the cafeterias. We need to make sure that we've got universal pre-K so that every child starts school ready to go. It's time to infuse early childhood support in our schools so that every fourth grader can read. Not we hold back people who can't, that we give the support so that every fourth grader can read. Because up until fourth grade, you learn to read. Beyond, you read to learn. And if you're not a reader, you're not a learner. And that's why we need reading coaches, reading support, literacy support for families. So we get every fourth grader to read. We're going to be the state that cracks that problem and fixes it first. And every graduate of a Michigan high school is going to have a plan. Whether it is they're going to pursue the 2-year free community college plan that I'm putting on the table, or they're going to use those 2 years toward a 4-year degree, or they're going to pursue a skilled trade. We're going to make sure every graduate is on the road to a high-wage job. I'm going to create the Department of the Great Lakes and Fresh Water here in Michigan. We are home to 21% of the world's fresh water, and we are lousy stewards of it. The proof is in a pipeline underneath the Great Lakes, a company that keeps pulling as much water out of the ground as they want, while families are getting shut off from access to water, and algae blooms in different parts of our states. Michigan is going to leapfrog from laggards to leaders in water policy. And we are going to put people to work in high-wage jobs by rebuilding the infrastructure in the state of Michigan. I don't know how many of you are paying a road tax, but I'm paying a road tax. I just replaced my windshield for the 3rd time in a year. Now I'm putting on more miles than the average person, but I'd rather that my road tax money be going to actually fixing the darn roads that we all drive on every single day. So as I get around the state, I am listening to people who have got a lot of wonderful stories, a lot of tough challenges, but I know that this party is the one that can fix the problems that we are facing as a state, that we can make this the state that people move to for opportunity again. I've been asked, are you running as a leader of the resistance? Are you running as this? Are you running as that? You know what? I'm running as a mom who cares about the kids of this state and wants to make sure every one of them have the support they need to have success in life. I'm running as a former prosecutor who has seen the inherent injustice and unfairness in our criminal system. I am running as a lawmaker who knows how to get things done. And I'm running as a Democrat who knows that when we make life better for everyone in the state, we truly do move this state forward. We are fortunate to live in the state of Michigan. But the greatest thing about this state are the people that live in it. Now I want to quick tell you one last thing and then we'll open it up for a discussion. But I see the symbol is the bridge. I chose the bridge to be my symbol. It's the Mighty Mac. It's the 5-mile suspension bridge that connects the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula. I chose this bridge because it was built 60 years ago. It was built when we had a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature. There were doubters everywhere who didn't think that it was even through engineering possible to build a bridge that big, 5-mile suspension bridge. But you know what? They worked together, they used Michigan brains, Michigan grit, and Michigan materials right out of the ground to build the Mighty Mac. And it connected people and gave people a path to be connected. And I think it is about time we reject politicians who want to build walls and elect someone who want to build bridges again. All right, let the mayhem begin. What do you got? Oh, okay, sorry. We have, sorry. This is why it's mayhem, because I don't follow the rules. Right?
Okay. So we do have some questions, and we'll go ahead and everyone submitted questions, or if you haven't, you have a note card and pass them around to people that are collecting them. We've already received a lot of note cards, so we're going to go ahead and ask them. We'll start with education. The School Finance Research Collaborative, headed by Bob Moore out of Oakland Schools, finished its work this week, and we want to know what your plan is for implementing the collaborative's findings. Relatedly, how do private school vouchers and charter schools figure into your plans for school funding?
Okay. You want to hand me that card so I make sure I hit everything? Do you mind?
Pretty messy, but
Okay. All right. I'll do my best. If I forget something, point it out, I'm sure you will. Okay, so this week, just this week, they announced that we are so far below what it really costs to adequately educate a child. How this study came to be was during the negotiations on a road plan that unfortunately didn't get passed. But during those negotiations, I put up some tough votes for roads. And in doing that, we had some negotiation about what would be a part of the plan. Number one is I got a veto guarantee out of the governor that he would veto any changes to prevailing wage. Number two, I got an adequacy study funded. So this is something that I've been working on for years, to actually be able to use science and metrics to assess what it really costs to educate a child in Michigan. Unfortunately, the governor bungled the adequacy plan, and now this independent collaborative came forward and did the work that I was trying to get started through our road package negotiations. Their findings, of course, are that we are way under investing in our children's education. That it's not just a matter of additional resources, it is about a real investment. They also found that not every child costs the same to educate, and that for equitable funding, we have to recognize that. Now this is we're very underfunded from where we should be according to their research, and I, of course, buy into it and recognize that that's got to be the goal. It's going to take a real dedication to education funding. It's going to take a governor with a backbone of titanium to get the legislature, no matter what the makeup is, to make that kind of investment. One of the things that I worked on as a legislator is I introduced a bill to constitutionally protect the K-12 budget from general fund raids, which started under Governor Granholm and has continued in a much worse way under Governor Snyder. I think we need to constitutionally protect the school aid fund. If we did just that, if we had a governor who just vetoed all the withdrawals out of the school aid fund, we could infuse $750 million back into our schools. I know Zach's clapping, he's a teacher, so you can clap, Zach. That would make a huge difference, but we have to have a real accountability on cyber schools and on charter schools in Michigan. The promise of charter schools was that they would be, they wouldn't have to abide by the same rules as the traditional public schools, and so they'd be able to innovate and they'd have much better outcomes. Well, the reality is that that's just not happening. In fact, charter school students are getting a worse education because charters open and close without any oversight. You have to have transportation to get to most of these charter schools, so it's not a real choice for families. And they don't have the same caliber teachers. But the worst part of the charter school system in Michigan is how many of them are for-profit.
Yeah.
Think about that motivation. You want the motivation to be how much money you can put in your pocket when you're doing such important work of educating the children of this state? Now, there are for-profit charters in other parts of the country. The national average is about 16% of charter schools are for-profit. Do you know what the average is in Michigan?
Probably
84%. So think about that. That's why we have such a system that's not working. We need a governor who is not beholden to the DeVos family.
Yes.
We need a governor who is going to veto legislative pet projects that take money out of at-risk and English language learners for their own pet projects and put another $100 million back into the foundation allowance for the children of this state. And we need a governor who is going to close down charter schools that aren't working. I don't even know if I want to get started on cyber schools, but I think the same level of accountability needs to apply. And you know what? If our taxpayer dollars are going into any sort of a school setting and it's not yielding educated kids, then we need to close that down, unless it's a public school. Unless it's a public school. And if it is a traditional public school, we need to give more support.
That's right.
The state that is turning schools around, public schools with high poverty populations, is Tennessee. The opposite of the state of Michigan right now, where if there is a school on the bottom 5% list, their solution isn't shutting them down and abandoning families. Theirs is infusing resources to support kids in high poverty settings. Those are the children that this adequacy study is pointing out cost more to educate. That's what equitable funding looks like. Thanks.
Our next question is, how will you make auto insurance more affordable?
How will we make auto insurance more affordable? So, I served in the legislature for 14 years. I served with a woman named Martha Scott, who is now a county commissioner but was a state senator at the time. And every single day at the close of session, Martha G. Scott would go to the microphone and read a letter from a constituent who was paying outrageous auto insurance rates. There is no question that auto insurance rates in Michigan are the worst in the country. And the worst, the toughest, community, the community that's got it the toughest is the city of Detroit and people who live in Metro Detroit. Now the solution, I think, is a governor who appoints an insurance commissioner that actually scrutinizes increases in auto insurance. We've never had that in Michigan. There is a line in statute that says the insurance commissioner shall scrutinize, and no one's ever done it in Michigan. The solution is electing an attorney general who's actually going to be an advocate for consumers again in the state of Michigan. And the solution is having a law on the books preventing redlining. So long as redlining is permitted, so long as an insurance company can decide your rates based on your marital status or your education level or your income level, so long as they're permitted to do that, we're never going to fix auto insurance. And that's why redlining has got to be a part of the solution. I am committed to bringing down auto insurance rates in Michigan. But we got to have a governor who doesn't do their work for the insurance industry, but does their work for the people of this state.
Senator Whitmer, our next set of questions is about infrastructure. Several members of our audience asked about widespread Wi-Fi, about roads, bridges, our sewer infrastructure, transportation, groundwater contamination. What are your thoughts?
I got a lot. That's a huge question. But when I talk about infrastructure, and I'm very excited. So I've been running for over a year. And now that we're finally in the election year, I couldn't be more happy, frankly, because we're going to start rolling out planks to the platform now that people are starting to pay attention. And I'm excited about it because infrastructure is one of those issues that no matter what community you go into, it is one of the first things that people are concerned about, that want fixed in this state. Whether it is roads or it is pipes under the ground or it is broadband. I was in St. Ignace, Michigan, right across the bridge. And I was speaking with a realtor who told me that she was just about to close on a big piece of land in St. Ignace, overlooking, the amazing waterfront. It was just a phenomenal piece of property, and this man was so excited to move to Michigan and bring his business there. And she said he was going to hire 50 people, and they were going to be good paying jobs. And ultimately, he decided not to go through with it because they didn't have broadband. And you think about whether it's in the rural Upper Peninsula or it's in Western Washtenaw County where I was last night. Someone asked me if I was in Canton last night. It took me like a full minute to remember where I was last night. But broadband is a part of the infrastructure problem in Michigan. Until we get everyone connected, the kids in those communities aren't going to get the education that they need. The businesses in those communities aren't going to be able to compete. This is an equity issue as much as many of the other issues that we're talking about tonight are. So I define infrastructure as roads and bridges, water pipes under the ground, and broadband. We're going to have a really aggressive infrastructure plan in Michigan. And I'm not ready to throw it on the table tonight, but I can tell you that we're working on something that would change this state and put tens of thousands of people to work immediately, that would raise our quality of life and fix the roads that we are confronting. When I create that Department of Great Lakes and Fresh Water, one of their jobs is going to be making sure that we are overseeing infrastructure and that communities are doing storm sewer separation. Not the most exciting thing to talk about, but critical to our quality of life. But you know, we're so far beyond tinkering to fix a problem. It's gotten to a point where the governor's own commission determined that to fix the roads and bridges in Michigan, it's probably $4 billion a year. That's what neglect does. That's what false choices do. That's what sticking your head in the sand does. And that's why we gotta have a Democrat to go in and clean things up.
Oh, yeah.
So there have been a few questions about your, for lack of a better term, progressive street cred. And I think the question that best sort of summarizes it is the question is, are there changes or policies implemented by Governor Snyder that you would like and would continue?
Okay, what do I like about, well, you know what I like? I like Medicaid expansion because I work my butt off to make it a reality, and we're gonna keep it that way. When we passed it, 630,000 Michiganders signed up. This year, even despite that guy in the White House, 670,000 people in Michigan. So I appreciate the question because my grandmother taught me, always try to find something good in anything. And Medicaid expansion is the thing I have for him.
Okay, what policies would you put in place to address the opiate crisis?
Oh, this is a really important question, and it actually is an issue that we've put together a 6-step plan for Michigan. We've seen other states take action, and unfortunately, in our state, our governor has shown no interest in really solving the opioid problem that we have. Ironically, the states that are doing the best job when it comes to combating opioid abuse and addiction are Mike Pence's Indiana and Chris Christie's New Jersey. So I'm not being partisan when I say there are some really basic things that we could do as a state that would combat opioid access on the front end before addiction sets in. 2.5 people die every single day from opioid addiction and abuse in Michigan right now. More people die of opioids than die in car accidents in a year here, or die of gunshots in Michigan. It's ravaging families and communities, and it's not a moral failing like so many people are trying to make it and divide us and keep us from solving the problem. It's addiction. It's a disease. So I think that the first thing that I would do as governor is declare a state of emergency and harness the resources necessary to give communities the anti-overdose drugs so they have it handy, to create a system where we've got more drug courts, to create the database, statewide database, so that doctors are checking every time they write a prescription, which they do in other states, but they're not doing right now in Michigan. It would require that pharmacists have to check in on that database too. And we've got to give people mental health services in Michigan. We have a lot more on my webpage with regard to the 6 steps that are part of my plan to fight opioid crisis here in Michigan. If you want to check it out and give me some feedback, I encourage you to do that.
Our next question, there are quite a few retirees in the audience tonight. And as a state employee retiree, one of our audience members asks, I'm concerned about my pension being taxed. What's your position on this?
I fought the pension tax. I tried to beat Rick Snyder on the pension tax. I led the fight, and I will sign the bill when it comes to my desk. We will get rid of the pension tax. That's my commitment. And here's how I know we will get rid of it. I'm not quick to make promises I can't unilaterally deliver on. I will tell you about my commitment. I will tell you about my plan and my vision and my strategy. But on this one, I can tell you it's going to happen because Republicans don't like it and Democrats fought against it the whole time that it was being debated and passed. So no matter the makeup of the next legislature, I'm quite confident it's coming to my desk and I will sign that thing.
All right.
An audience member says, in an era unlike any other in which political outsiders hold office, often to disastrous effect, how will you inspire confidence as a political insider in Michigan voters?
Okay, great question. I think after 12 months of Donald Trump and 7 years of Rick Snyder, isn't it about time we hire someone who knows what the heck they're doing?
Oh, yeah.
That's really when I should drop the mic and walk out.
Yeah, you should have done that. It'd been excellent.
Now, this first one is a question. It says, who will make a good lieutenant governor?
Oh.
The second one is not a question, it's sort of a statement. It says gerrymandering. Help us, please.
All right, amen. So I'm going to take the second one first because that's the much easier question. Gerrymandering. First of all, I know that there are people from Voters Not Politicians in the room, so let's give them a hand. Raise your hand if you worked on Voters Not Politicians. All right. Gerrymandering has just absolutely, that's the whole reason we have so many of the problems that we have in the state of Michigan right now. When I went into my last term in the Senate, I took my oath of office as the Senate Democratic leader, just coming off of an election where we got almost 50% of the total votes cast were for Democratic candidates on the ballot. So it really should have been a 19-19 tie. I should have been the co-leader of the Michigan Senate. But instead, I was the leader of 12 out of 38. Because of gerrymandering, 26 of those 38 Senate seats were decided in a Republican primary. When Republican primary voters are setting the agenda for us all, we're talking about the slimmest group of people with the most extreme views, setting the agenda that we all have to live by. Gerrymandering is undemocratic, and that's why I was so glad to see Voters Not Politicians catch on. I was so amazed to see the volunteer and the organization. Like, it was a phenomenal thing, and that's the kind of energy that I'm talking about when I say I'm getting around the state. People are on fire, they are engaged. So we've got to pass Voters Not Politicians. We absolutely have to make sure that we've got fair line drawing after the next census in 2020. I'm gonna dovetail for a second into the experience question. Because I served with 3 different governors during my time in the legislature. And I'll tell you that there was one who was a lot better able at getting an agenda accomplished than the other 2. And I'm talking about John Engler. And I'm not praising him, let's be very clear. Hear me correctly. But he knew how to work that legislature. He knew how to set a budget. He knew how shrewd appointments made a long-term difference for his party. And he built a Republican Party and a bench. That's what we need to do in this election. Because we're gonna win this race. And I'm still gonna, all right, let's clap for that. But we're gonna win this race. And even when Voters Not Politicians passes, we don't get another shot at fixing the state Senate and voting by real, fair districts until after 4 years. And that's why having a governor who knows what she's doing makes a huge difference to the agenda that we all care about. Now, running mate. I don't know who the running mate's gonna be yet. You got suggestions? You know, I take very seriously the thought of what a ticket looks like so that we win. That's the goal, we gotta win. And I want a teammate who sees the world the same way, who's gonna fight like heck every single day to win this election, and then who's gonna be great at governance in case I leave the state for a day or 2. And so that requires a real vetting process. I gotta tell you, as a candidate for statewide, for a governor's race, probably one of the most premier races in the country. The whole world's gonna be watching to see what happens in Michigan in this governor's race. I know that the first person I researched was me, because I wanna know what lines of attack they're bringing. And guess what? The good news is, even after seeing it, I'm still here. So there's not too much to be worried about. But the point is, I'm making a joke. I hope I didn't make you all nervous. But I need to, we will have a process for determining a running mate, and there are a number of people that have reached out and shown some interest in being considered. And the good news is that there are a lot of fantastic Democrats across our state who are ready to sacrifice privacy, put the work in, and win this election, and I'm excited about that.
Next, we have a couple questions about campaign financing. What's your position on campaign financing? And another question asks, who is your single largest campaign contributor?
My single largest campaign contributor is Emily's List at this point in time.
Yay!
And with regard to campaign finance, we've got to have reform in Michigan. The rules are so perverted in this state. You know, when I was in the Senate, my Republican counterpart and I were on a panel, and we were talking about campaign finance, and they had just doubled the limits so that they went from, you know, $3,400 to $6,800 for a PAC. It's went from $34,000 to $68,000. They doubled everything, and they did it because their donors can afford to give them a lot more money. Let's just be honest. But we were sitting and talking about campaign finance, and I talked about every campaign I've ever run has been locally driven, small dollar funding, and it's hard work. It's not easy to compete with these guys who have 1 or 2 donors who can write enormous checks. I said, you know, after a quarter, we had, you know, a few thousand donors, and they had given, you know, $30 a piece, or whatever the numbers were. And I had looked at his campaign finance statement. For the whole quarter, he funded his whole quarter, which he raised twice as much as I did, my caucus and I. He made 1 phone call to 1 family on the west side of the state. They got 9 big checks. We have 1 family setting the agenda. So we need real campaign finance reform. I will tell you that in this race, I am really proud that we raised $3 million last year No one's ever done that before. But the thing I'm most proud of, and no other candidate can say this, 86% of those dollars came from inside Michigan. And 83% were $100 or less. So that's a much more grassroots campaign than anyone else is running, and I think that shows strength, that shows energy, and I'll tell you that the most fond contribution that I've received, and that sounds like a weird thing to say, but it came with a note from a woman right after the presidential election. And it was a check written to Whitmer for governor. I hadn't even formed a campaign committee yet. So I had to return it, otherwise it would have been unethical. But it was written for $20.18. In hopes I run in 2018.
Next audience member said, love all your ideas so far, exclamation mark. But how will we pay for them? And then another part of the question is, what are the specific proposals you have to raise revenue for the state budget?
So see, Democrats are responsible. We want to know how we're going to pay for it, and I think that that's an extremely important question. And I'm never going to throw a proposal on the table that I can't pay for, that I don't have a plan to make a reality. I'm not one of those people that is just going to say whatever I think it is that someone wants to hear. I want to know that I'm going to be able to deliver. I believe in reasonable expectations and over-delivering as opposed to the other way around. So when I was in the Senate, I authored the Michigan 2020 plan, and that was a 4-year college plan modeled after the Kalamazoo Promise. I paid for it by closing corporate tax loopholes. Now the state, we need to do that. The state budget at the time was about $40 billion, $42 billion, all right? The amount of money that we don't collect in taxes, which is spending. If a tax is due but you choose not to collect it, that's spending. Dwarfs how much money we do spend on our state budget. So the amount of money we give away to corporations while you all are paying your taxes dwarfs the government that we are able to fund. If we found 10% savings, if we found 5% savings, we could pay for every Michigander who wants to go to a 4-year degree to get one. That's how I paid for it. So, when I talk about how we get more money into education, I am going to close off all the raids on the school aid fund that have occurred under this governor being here. Our infrastructure package is going to be coming out it's going to be coming out soon. I hate to put a date on it because things get edited and pushed back, but it's going to be coming out soon, and it is going to be a jobs and infrastructure package, and I think it's going to knock your socks off when you see what it is we're going to do, how many people we're going to put to work, and how we pay for it. But rest assured that as these planks come out, there will be a funding source attached to every single one of them that is legitimate and that is doable, and that I am going to go to the mat to make a reality.
Our next question is, what is your stance on medical marijuana?
I only pause because I'm trying to figure out how long of an answer to give you. So, I'm going to be a yes vote. And, or medical marijuana? Oh, well is it recreational? Okay. All right, well, I'll answer both just in case anyone's curious. So, back in 2008, when medical marijuana was on the ballot, I co-chaired the stem cell campaign. I had introduced for years legislation to try to permit stem cell research in Michigan. We were one of only 5 states that criminalized the most cutting edge research and hope for cures. And I kept trying to introduce legislation to fix that. We couldn't do it, so we went around the legislature and went to the ballot. It was the same year as medical marijuana. I supported both. And I supported it long before we knew whether or not it was going to be socially acceptable. But because everything that I had been through with my mom and her brain cancer, I was absolutely convinced anything we can do to relieve pain or give someone a better quality of life in their sickest days is something we should be doing. Same with stem cell research, which is why I became such a passionate advocate and we got it passed. And that's why I embrace both of those. Now, here we are at a point in time where states are legalizing the recreational use of marijuana. And Jeff Sessions, who knows what's going to happen out of Washington, D.C. It's still a Schedule I drug, and it's a very nervous place to be for a lot of people who are in even the medical marijuana industry. But states that are moving forward have find that their voters overwhelmingly pass it, and I think that's what's going to happen in Michigan. If it gets on the ballot, I believe it is going to pass. And so my lens is always, how do we make it work for Michigan? These other states have had some real problems, just on the front end of not thinking through what other laws do they need placed in the books to make sure that it doesn't get into the hands of children or people that are under 21. Your brain is still wiring, and where marijuana use has some devastating effects. We can learn from those states, but I think it is time that it's going to be on the ballot and it's going to pass, and I'm going to vote for it. And then that helps that other question about how we're going to pay for everything.
Our next question is about right to work. What kind of plan do you have to repeal right to work?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for whomever wrote it for phrasing it that way, because you're obviously someone who understands what it's going to take to get rid of right to work. So when we had the right to work, I hate even using their language. When we passed their corporate servitude bills, you know, it's signed into law, it's on the books. It is going to take a legislature to send it to my desk in order to repeal right to work. Now, there are a lot of things. A governor who knows how to use a budget, who knows how to make appointments, who knows how to have vendors who are contracting with the state. There are a lot of policy that a governor can make a reality without going the traditional route of the legislature. But if we're going to repeal right to work, we've got to end gerrymandering and take back the legislature. That's what it's going to take. I've heard people say on day one, I'm going to repeal right to work, and I can't say that to you because I know that that's not how it works, and I can't deliver on that promise. But I am absolutely committed to protecting collective bargaining in Michigan. I always have been, and we're going to work to make that work.
This audience member says, I'm concerned about the president's recently stated opinions that would allow medical providers to deny services to some minorities. What is currently being done to expand the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act, and what do you plan to do?
So, in Michigan, I mean, you're in a stew crowd. You probably know this. I don't want to be, telling you something you already know. But we had an effort, the last 4 years that I was serving in the Senate to amend our Elliott-Larsen civil rights law to extend protections to everyone in the LGBT community. In the throes of the legislation moving through, the business community came on, there was this great coalition that came together because the business community has seen that they've got employees who need and want and expect these protections. That is a recruiting problem for the state of Michigan, that we don't extend protections for your home and your employment to everyone in our state. And so they came together and finally got some traction with the Republican legislature. And of course, we Democrats have always been there on this. We've just been in the minority. And during the process, they decided they wanted to amend it to only extend protections to L, G, and B, not the transgender community. And it was then that we Democrats said, we're not going to support that. And they were flabbergasted. They thought, well, this is a small step in the right direction. We said, you don't understand the community. You don't understand that the transgender community is the most vulnerable of the whole LGBT caucus, the whole LGBT coalition. And so we stood together, and we stood with the LGBT community, because it was at their behest that we draw a line in the sand. So unfortunately, the Republicans didn't have any interest in negotiating or talking, and the bill did not move. And so we have yet to amend the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to protect everyone in the LGBT community. I will work until that happens in this state. We had a debate. There was a young man named Matt Epling who lived in East Lansing, Michigan. His family was a constituent of mine when I was in the House and the Senate. And this young man took his life, and one of the most astounding things you see as a legislator is a parent who turns a tragedy into a cause to protect other people's kids. And so his dad worked on legislation to create anti-bullying legislation that would be required in every school district across the state of Michigan. 8 years we introduced that. 8 years we tried to get it passed. And then there was a particularly heinous story that got a lot of headlines around the country, and all of a sudden the Republicans were interested in trying to pass this bill. But you know what? I don't get caught up in credit. I was just glad that for whatever the reason, even if it's about headlines, that we finally were getting action moving forward on an important issue that I really care about. And then in the last minute, right before the floor vote, they came in and amended the bill, named after my constituent, to create an exception that the bully can't get in trouble if it was done for a personal, moral, or religious reason. Exactly. They gutted the bill. And I went into my caucus, the caucus that all of our names were on this bill as co-sponsors, because we had been fighting for this for years. I said, you guys, we can't vote for it. We cannot vote for it. They have just gutted the whole reason for this bill. And I had a couple of members who were, I said, but my name's on it. It says it's an anti-bullying bill. Now I'm going to vote against it. That's really hard to do. I said, I know. But we're going to stick together, and we're going to vote against this thing. And they finally said, okay, we'll follow you, but you better give a good speech, Whitmer. So we went out on the floor, and I don't even know what I said. I've seen it a couple times because that speech went viral. It didn't change a vote. The Republicans voted for it, and we Democrats voted against it. And I actually called the father of the young man it was named after to make sure he knew why I was voting against it. But what happened in the days after was nothing short of incredible. People weighed in. And it wasn't, my speech went viral, and it wasn't because it was that great a speech, and it certainly wasn't about me. It was because it was an issue that resonated with people. That so many of us have been bullied, or had a child who was bullied, or a neighbor who was bullied, or a friend who was. People were calling into my office from around the world. They had a contest in my office, and the guy who won, who got the field of the call from the furthest away, was the guy who talked to someone from Tunisia. But people were astounded, and it was the shame and the Rachel Maddow and all of the different television shows that were covering this, that finally shamed the Republican House into reaching out and working with me and writing a bill that actually did some good in our schools. And I think that that's one little example of why our commitment to the LGBT community, to fighting back bullies, whether they are in our schoolyards or in our White House, is what defines who we are and makes this a state that we are going to be proud to live in. And it starts with amending Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act.
Both.
Yeah.
Both, I'm working and it's, okay.
Our next question is, what is your feelings on the current, gun laws? And how do you feel about concealed weapons being carried in dorms, schools, stadiums, bars?
Schools.
Okay, so I would 100% very quickly veto that bill if it came to my floor. I want to start with that because I think it's important for us to acknowledge we should not have these weapons in schools, in bars, and places where alcohol is used. I want to continue though for a second because Michigan has got a big hunting culture. It does. I grew up in a household with a stepdad who was a hunter. My mom concocted all sorts of weird things with venison when I was a kid. And I recognize that there are a lot of people who enjoy that aspect to the Michigan lifestyle. But I also think it's really important to acknowledge that there are a lot of responsible gun owners who don't want to see anyone with a criminal background get access to a weapon or mental illness or a domestic violence issue. So I think it's going to be really important that we draw the line where we absolutely all see the world the same way. We acknowledge that there are facets to the Michigan culture that we need to be respectful of, but also owe it to the people of this state to fight to make sure that we keep gun safety laws on the books, that we require training, and that we keep weapons out of the hands of people who've got no business carrying firearms.
This is our last question. So Amazon had some news this morning. Michigan and Detroit did not make the final 20 list of cities that were being considered for the second headquarters. And the reason given, according to our questionnaire, was a lack of a talented workforce in Michigan. So what will you do to grow and retain a talented workforce?
So when I talk about the Michigan that people used to move to, a Michigan where there were great paying jobs where you could afford to raise your family and retire and maybe even buy a little place somewhere on a lake. The Michigan where our kids had great schools and the roads were safe and every community had clean water, reliable, affordable, clean water. We also had the best skilled workforce on the planet. And right now we have got a skills gap in Michigan. And it's not the fault of the people of this state. It's a lack of leadership from our capital. It is college degrees that used to be funded 75% by the state and 25% by the student to now the reverse, where so few people in our own state can afford to get a four-year degree if that's their path. But we've also stripped from our schools industrial arts. I don't know how many of you took industrial arts, but I took home repair. I learned how to change my oil, and when the light switch didn't work in my mom's den, I rewired that sucker. These are the experiences that expose us to different paths. You can make a phenomenal living in almost any community in this state as a plumber, as an electrician, as a drywaller. When I say we, I don't really mean we, but we just built a new stadium in downtown Detroit. And they had to bring in electricians from Windsor and Toledo. And it's not because Michiganders are 100% employed in high-wage jobs. It's because we haven't built those paths for people to get the skills they need. Every one of us has a different path, and we've got to think about the world differently. It's not just four-year degrees, although we got to make them affordable. It's not just community college or just skilled trades. We've got to make those available to everyone. That's how we get people into the skills necessary to make sure that we've got the concentration of talent that businesses move to employ. But another piece to that decision on Amazon was transit. And I think that's a point that we need to work on too. I know it wasn't the focus of the question, but when they asked for the bid, they wanted to know what were the schools like for our employees' kids? What are the roads like so that our goods get where they need to be? Do you have public transit? Do you have an international airport? And do you have the skilled workforce that we need? We had the airport. We need the rest. And we are building. It would have been laughable to try to compete for that 4 years ago. And that tells you how far we've come in a short period of time, but we got a lot more work to do. Thank you, everybody. Real quick, sorry. I always end wrong. All right. If you're coming to the Women's March, and I know you've got buses coming, we are having a tailgate party 3 blocks away on the corner of Washington and Washtenaw. It's on our Facebook page. Everyone's welcome. I don't know how long we'll have hot dogs because I do think we're going to have a good sized crowd. But because the Women's March incorporated as a 501c3, there won't be politicians speaking at the Women's March, so I wanted to create a forum, and we may have people like Debbie Stabenow, and we've invited a lot of different people, and the more the merrier, so please come by. And if you want to get involved in the campaign, we're collecting signatures, we're doing fundraising, we're getting ready to start knocking doors in March and getting organized. So if you want to take part on any of those fronts, there's a role for everyone. GretchenWhitmer.com, and my people are here too. Now I'll say thank you and good night.